Following the reoccupation of Royal Lodge earlier this year, the British royal family seemed to have shut down an ancient chapter. However, Prince William discovered a fresh and even deeper rift behind that door, and even more difficult to hide. The home where Andrew lived, Royal Lodge, having survived more than 10 years and had been said to have been kept in excellent condition for years, now stood in a decaying, in terrible condition, and completely out of keeping with the massive budgets that were authorized. Being the heir apparent, William might not ignore the situation. What started out as a brief examination quickly evolved into a silent research. Although the documentation was correct, the money trail raised questions. Locations. The more he explored, the more recognizable characters in the royal system developed, which ultimately resulted in Prince Andrew's name and an opulent suburban home. As elderly when evidence started to surface, the primary query was no longer how royal this lodge had been neglected. Would the monarchy decide to safeguard its reputation, or would it bear the price of discovering the ultimate truth? The fierce east wind continued to blow around Windsor in the early months of 2026. The Great Park. There has never been a heavier royal atmosphere. Following a series of public disagreements, ongoing scandals, and relentless media pressure in public, the British monarchy ultimately took a firm stand. The royal Prince Andrews had lived in Lodge, a historic mansion, for a long time. Formally taken back, Prince William by early February, the heir apparent, was personally assigned by King Charles to supervise an examination of the property prior to transferring ownership to a properly chosen fresh management firm with a focus on cultural heritage. William didn't see merely as a formality. Royal Lodge was more than just an old structure to him. It was a representation of regal duty. William drove himself there that morning. Windsor had just 2 reliable assistants and no large entourage. He got out of the automobile as it came to a stop at the big iron gates, drew a deep, took a chilly breath and motioned for the gates to open. He entered the grand hall and noticed the improvement right away. It wasn't the same smell of well-maintained antique wood, but the smell of moisture and long-term disregard, despite the fact that it had only been vacant for a month. The lofty windows let in dim light onto the ground, emphasizing wall fissures. There are wet areas all over the plaster. Large flakes of paint peeled off. The roof was leaking water, causing long, dark streaks to descend to the baseboards. William stopped and gingerly touched the wall. His fingers emerged smudged in white mold and dust. His annoyance increased as he scowled. The electrical infrastructure was terrible. A hallway switch was switched by an assistant. A few lamps momentarily flickered, then passed away entirely. With a quiet voice, William shook his head. How could this have happened? He went farther. Once, the magnificent drawing room was utilized to had numerous areas with deteriorating floorboards after hosting significant guests. Paintings thick with grime, it hung crookedly. The main bedroom that Andrew once occupied stood. Despite being vacant, it was nonetheless obviously decayed. William didn't say much, but his eyes grew colder. He distinctly recalled the lengthy paperwork and annual maintenance reports, signed by dependable advisors attesting to Royal Lodge's consistent leadership state. Millions of pounds were authorized for repainting, repairs, interior renovation, damp-proofing, and rewiring. The amounts were large enough to maintain the occupants' immaculate condition. The actual situation, however, was a nearly deserted structure. Because of the difference, William was not merely shocked but incensed. This degradation was not organic. This was willful disregard. He paused at Andrew's favorite room, the library. The oak bookshelves were still there, but the leather and volumes were yellowed. Moisture caused the bindings to crack. William pulled out a vintage ledger on the desk. Dust rose. He closed it after turning a few pages. This is unacceptable, he replied, raising his voice just enough for his assistive devices to hear. They stated everything was finished, yet nothing was done. William gave the technical staff instructions to carry out a thorough examination. They went from one floor to another, taking measurements, photos, and comments. The preliminary report was completed by the afternoon. All set, William read every paragraph while seated in the study space that was least damaged. Every one it felt like a stab to use figure and description. In the previous 5 years, the budget for maintenance was more than $15 million. However, the present situation revealed less than in reality. 10% of the funds had been used for the property. He got up and walked over to the view of the overgrown garden from the window. William clenched his fists around the sill in frustration and rage. Rushing. He considered the dignity of the British taxpayers and the royal family, who provided the residence funding, of the family's need to uphold trust. "This isn't oversight," he muttered. "This is deception," William said without hesitation. Went back to his desk and dialed his chief assistant. "Get an internal investigation ready right away. I desire each and every Royal Lodge's financial records, invoices, and contracts for the last 10 years. Nothing should be missed." He spoke in a determined tone. Everyone knew the resolve. With a nod, the helper immediately departed. William took a seat, opened his laptop. He went over the previous reports once more. Now, every word and number carried a fresh interpretation. He decided to rip the truth apart after sensing its haze. In addition to elucidating the condition of the house, the probe would reveal the truth about the false numbers and the dubious inaction of those in charge. William was aware that a second door had opened when the Royal Lodge door closed. 1. Revealing information that might upend the monarchy. William oversaw a group of financial specialists, independent auditors, and royal officials from a makeshift office in Windsor. Attorneys to sift through piles of paperwork. He also did not want the whole public to know. He knew time was not on their favor, but it was soon. He showed up every morning. Black coffee on the desk in the morning, gaze focused on computer displays, piles of paper records. The records seemed perfect on the surface. Each expense has the key advisor's signatures and the royal red stamp. And thorough progress reports every 3 months. Things like a full replacement of the electrical system, the waterproofing of the walls and roof, the costs of renovating the interiors and timber floors were explicitly stated. Over the course of 10 years, it reached tens of millions of pounds. According to documents that the Crown has, the entire maintenance budget for the estate and the royal office between 2016 and 20,125 surpassed £18 million. With skepticism, William flipped each page. Become more powerful. If the money was spent, why does the residence look like this? Queried he. Discreetly in a meeting with the team head behind closed doors. The pivotal moment occurred when the group investigated real-world financial transactions. They asked to enter the royal accounts for the maintenance of real estate. Large transfers adhered to the norm. Process from royal monies to designated middleman firms after that. Subcontractors split off into smaller groups. Tracing, however, further altered the situation. After going through the majority of the monies at an American bank, intermediaries came together to form a single account. There was no clear link between the account and any reputable British supplier. Furthermore, William directed direct communication with established royal material suppliers, businesses that had provided Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace for many decades. He didn't assign middlemen. He directly participated in a number of calls and meetings. The initial meeting was held at a large supplier's office on the outskirts of London. The business's William was seated across from the director, a man in his 60s with decades of expertise. In a confidential conference space. "Your Royal Highness," he murmured, trembling a little with shock. "It has been at least 8 years since we last provided Royal Lodge with any resources. No concrete. Nothing. No electrical connections. No oak timbers. No bricks." Suppressing a mixture of anger and exhilaration, William nodded slowly. "What about the material delivery reports for large-scale maintenance projects?" he inquired. The director gave a headshake. "Despite multiple requests for quotes, we never received official contracts. Were ever signed. I thought these were miscommunications or backup plans." Meetings with additional suppliers, such as electrical contractors and paint businesses, had the same results. Outcome: nobody had shipment invoices, delivery receipts, or any other documentation in their official records of supplies. Royal documents fully detailed the renovations, yet there was no trace of it in the actual supply chain. This particular detail was similar to an explosive that burned slowly. William summoned the team to an urgent nighttime meeting. The tiny space was illuminated by faint yellow lights. The air was thick. William firmly said, "This is not an administrative error," with passion in his voice. "This siphoning is intentional. Where is the money now?" He was deeply disappointed. Not just due to the enormous losses, but also because the royal trust had been abused. William didn't sleep that night. He sat by himself at his desk, gazing into the Windsor Park's darkness, sorrow mixed with anger. The monarchy, a representation of integrity, had suffered damage from one of its own. However, he also felt the force of truth, appearing gradually. Although the inquiry was far from finished, William was aware of the documents that were the initial clue to a far bigger secret was never supplied. And until all was revealed, he would not give up. Actually, it all started long before Royal Lodge was taken back. As the initial scandal started to damage Prince Andrew's standing in 2018, he discreetly began making plans to safeguard his future. The youthful, promising Andrew, the prince of his youth, was now anxious all the time. Losing royal funds, losing Royal Lodge, and perhaps losing the protection of his family. Long, lonely nights in the house led him to start formulating a scheme. A daring, risky scheme that, in his opinion, was required to guarantee long-term security. Andrew wasn't acting by himself. He selected Edward Hargrove, a reliable comrade, a mid-level royal advisor, has more than 20 years of experience in the palace system. Hargrove was immediately in charge of approving maintenance plans for Royal Lodge and other royal assets. The contracts were signed by him, talked with contractors and looked over progress reports. Hargrove was more than just a worker. He held the secret to making paper figures come to life. They met for the first time in secret in a London private club. Andrew was straightforward in his speech. If everything falls apart, I need a place to hide, and I need it constructed from existing resources. At first, Hargrove was hesitant, but once Andrew brought up a 10% commission and a lasting defense, he nodded. I'll handle it, Hargrove muttered, his voice a mixture of dread and ambition. The plan was stealthy, complex, and implemented gradually. The annual maintenance budget for the Royal Lodge was authorized with substantial funds. Millions of pounds needed urgent renovations, significant repairs, and system improvements. Everything was legitimate on paper. Agreements with middle-tier businesses, invoices for payments and reports on completion. Actually, just a tiny percentage of the Royal Lodge received sufficient funding to keep the impression of continuous take care. After passing through several levels of intermediaries, the majority flowed into an independent Surrey building enterprise. This business, ostensibly owned by a trustworthy stand-in, started constructing a separate home for Andrew, a contemporary, discreet about 40 minutes' drive from Windsor. This property in a peaceful suburban location. The residence was sufficiently opulent to provide Andrew a sense of security without being overt. 3 stories, a sizable yard, a swimming pool indoors, and upscale security systems. Every item, including furniture and stones, was bought with royal money for upkeep. Every expense listed under the label Royal Lodge Maintenance was approved by Hargrove Project, after which the funds were transferred via an American intermediate account prior to it went back to the United Kingdom. Andrew personally kept an eye on developments. From a distance, wearing a baseball cap pulled down, he made multiple nighttime visits to the location. Low, speaking to the site manager in whispers. Whenever he witnessed the walls rising, though when the roof was finished, he experienced a mixture of dread and profound happiness. He gripped the driving wheel firmly as he drove away, thinking, at last, I have something that really belongs to me. The years-long process was carried out in complete hush. The royal family had no suspicions. The reports were always perfect. Development proceeded according to plan, and royal. The lodge looked well-maintained from the outside. Andrew took cautious to stay away from any electrical trail. Bernard just makes brief calls. There are no direct emails or clear messages, telephones or private in-person encounters. Hargrove was rewarded handsomely. Each year, hundreds of thousands of pounds are sufficient to guarantee his silence and fidelity. The suburban home was almost complete, completely furnished, and Andrew is prepared to move in at any time. When reclamation appeared, Andrew remained calm. He was prepared with a contingency plan, a refuge constructed with funds provided by the monarchy. During their last encounters, Hargrove often reminded him, everything ought to be absolutely quiet, Your Highness. Nobody can find out. Andrew nodded and handed over another hefty amount as gratitude. He thought the plan was ideal. Spotless records, no physical evidence at the suburban house and Royal Lodge, both of which are registered under an intermediary business that is hard to track down. When Prince Andrew formally departed from the Royal Lodge in early 2026, he didn't have any housing concerns. Already, he had a destination, a quiet testament to long-term planning. However, Andrew did not be aware that Prince William had started tearing the cover apart on the other side. The supplies were never delivered to the first hint was Royal Lodge, and the silently formed house was roughly to become indisputable proof. Andrew continued to live with a delusion of security as the storm silently gathered, poised to destroy everything he had created. Conversely, the group had amassed enough leads to identify a crucial individual, Edward Hargrove, the mid-level royal advisor who was in charge of approving the royal maintenance budget's properties for over 20 years. Hargrove had endorsed the majority of the agreements pertaining to Royal Lodge and acted as a conduit between Andrew and the contractors who act as middlemen. His name kept coming up in suspicious transactions, which are always meticulously hidden behind flawless administrative processes. William made the private decision to face him head-on. He wished to keep the scandal from spreading prior to the acquisition of reliable evidence. In the late afternoon, Hargrove was called into a locked room at Clarence's house, where William frequently worked. Private. No official recording, no secretaries, just the two of them and a reliable assistant standing outside the entrance. Hargrove came in with a pale grey suit, a pale face, but making an effort to remain calm. He sat and bowed as he was supposed to. Across from William spoke right away in a chilly, low voice. "Mister, we both know why you're here, Hargrove. The Royal Lodge expenses, more than £18 million over the last 10 years, have hardly left any physical evidence at all. The house, no construction, no materials, and no actual repairs. Where is the money now?" With his eyes fixed on the table, Hargrove swallowed hard. "Everything was done according to protocol, Your Royal Highness. My approval was based on reports from the contractors who were assigned. The agreements were legitimate. Bills bore the royal seal and advancement were thoroughly recorded. If an error occurred, it most likely came from the perspective of the contractor." A thin folder was slid across the table, a list of the main vendors the group had spoken with. They all acknowledged that they haven't provided Royal Lodge with any materials in a long time. Not one roll of cable, not a bag of cement. "How do you explain that?" Hargrove glanced at the documents, hands trembling slightly. "There may have been record-keeping errors, or perhaps subcontractors changed. I did not personally oversee every delivery. My role was only to approve budgets based on reports." William leaned forward, eyes piercing. "Mr. Hargrove, we traced the money flow after passing through intermediaries. Most of it converged in an American account belonging to a company unconnected to any royal project. You know about it, don't you?" Hargrove was silent for several seconds, then slowly shook his head. "I'm not sure. Perhaps it was a subsidiary or partner. I did not manage the detailed banking transactions." The confrontation lasted nearly an hour. Hargrove maintained his position. Everything was by the book. No personal wrongdoing. "If there is a problem, I am ready to cooperate to clarify it," he said, trying to sound sincere. But William noticed the tremor in his voice, the evasion in his eyes. The meeting ended without a confession, but William had enough to continue. Meanwhile, on the other side, Prince Andrew began to feel the pressure. Hargrove had warned him that William is digging deep. Andrew was now at the Suey suburban house where he had temporarily moved after leaving Royal Lodge. He sat in the study, staring into the dark garden, heart beating faster than usual. He knew that if William found this house, everything would collapse. Without hesitation, Andrew severed all direct contact with Hargrove. No calls, no messages, no meetings. He used a burner phone to send a short message. Erase all traces. No further contact. Next, Andrew transferred a large sum, approximately £500,000, into Hargrove's personal account through an international intermediary channel. "This is the final payment. Stay silent," he added. Hargrove received the money, but his mind grew increasingly troubled. Andrew did not stop there. He contacted a discreet London real estate broker. "Sell this house, highest possible price as quickly as possible. No publicity, private transaction." He believed that a fast sale would launder the money through legitimate channels and blur the financial trail. "Everything will be over," Andrew told himself, trying to calm his nerves. But deep down, fear was growing. The fear of being exposed by his own brother and nephew. After the confrontation, William remained unshaken. He knew denial was only a temporary shell. Hargrove had revealed too many weaknesses: hesitation, cold sweat, averted eyes. William ordered discreet surveillance on Hargrove. Not public, only professional methods. "I want to know who he meets, where he goes, what he says," he instructed. William sat in his office looking at the pile of documents, determination burning fiercely. He knew denial only bought time. The truth was about to explode. After the tense confrontation with Edward Hargrove, William knew he needed living proof. Irrefutable evidence. He ordered a discreet professional surveillance team operating directly under his closest aide's command. In the following days, Hargrove tried to maintain normally. He still went to the palace office, signed documents, and attended meetings as usual. But the surveillance team noticed small changes. He checked his watch frequently, glanced at his phone often, and left the office earlier than normal. That night, when London had fallen asleep, Hargrove left his Kensington apartment. He drove a black sedan, not turning on the headlights immediately, heading southwest. The surveillance team followed at a distance, using 2 vehicles in rotation to avoid detection. Hargrove did not head towards central London or any familiar location. He drove straight to Swirling, the quiet suburbs with small roads leading to private villas. Hargrove's car stopped in front of a modern house, white walls, secluded garden set back from the main road. The team reported immediately to William. "He is at a private residence in Swirling. Another vehicle is parked in front, registered to an intermediary company." William at Clarence House received the message at midnight. Sleepless, he sat at his desk with a cold cup of tea. When confirmation arrived that Andrew was also present through surveillance photographs, William gripped the phone tightly. "They are meeting. This is the evidence we need." Although the team could not get close enough to record the conversation, risk of detection was too high. The midnight secret meeting between Hargrove and Andrew was already a fatal piece of the puzzle. Hargrove stayed inside for about 45 minutes, then left alone. Andrew remained. William received the update via secure line and gave the order. "We have the location, the time, and the meeting between the 2 main figures. Now is the moment to act." 2 royal security officers approached Hargrove politely after he exited the house. "Mr. Hargrove, please come with us to the palace immediately. Some matters require clarification." Hargrove went pale and did not resist. He was taken to a sealed room at Buckingham Palace where William was waiting. Hargrove bowed his head and remained silent for a long time. Tears finally rolled down his cheeks. The pressure of recent days, the denial in the sealed room, the large payment from Andrew to buy his silence, the fear of exposure finally caused him to break. "I can't bear it anymore," he whispered. "Prince Andrew directed everything. From 2018, he instructed me to divert the Royal Lodge maintenance budget. A small portion was used on the residents to keep up appearances. The majority went toward constructing the suburban house registered in his name through an intermediary company." William listened without interrupting. Hargrove continued, voice shaking. "I approved fake contracts, created fictitious invoices, routed money through American intermediaries and back to the UK. He promised to protect me and gave me large percentages. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid of losing my job, afraid of retaliation. When he learned the investigation had begun, he cut contact and sent money to keep me quiet. I deleted emails and messages, but I kept some backup records." Hargrove took a USB drive and several sheets of paper from his briefcase, handwritten confession, bank transaction backups, and encrypted emails between him and Andrew. "This is everything. I surrender it all. I just want it to end." William accepted the materials, emotions surging, fury at the betrayal, but also relief that the truth had surfaced. He said nothing more, only nodded to security. Hargrove was escorted away for formal questioning under legal supervision. William stood and walked into the dark corridor. He looked out the window at London shrouded in the night, victory mingled with sorrow. He now had a direct confession, financial records, and proof of the midnight meeting. Every piece fits. William knew that tomorrow morning he would report to King Charles. And Andrew, despite trying to sell the house to erase traces, could no longer escape. The next morning, As the sun barely appeared through London's grey clouds, Prince William held irrefutable evidence in his hands. Edward Hargrove's detailed confession USB containing bank transaction backups, encrypted emails, secret transfer receipts, and images of the midnight meeting at the Surrey house, all neatly arranged in a thick dossier. William had barely slept the night before, but his eyes were clear and his determination fierce. He knew this was the decisive moment, not only to clarify a case of budget misappropriation, but to protect the honour and trust of the entire royal family. William drove himself to Buckingham Palace, where King Charles waited in his private study. No ceremony, no entourage, just father and son in the familiar room with old paintings and a crackling fireplace. William placed the dossier on the desk, voice low but clear. "Father, I have completed the Royal Lodge investigation. Here's the truth. Andrew colluded with Edward Hargrove to divert maintenance funds. The money was not used to repair the residence, but to build a private house in Surrey. More than £12 million was misdirected over many years. Hargrove has confessed everything, and we have financial evidence, testimony, and photographs." King Charles took the dossier and slowly turned each page. His face showed no strong emotion, but his hands trembled slightly as he read Hargrove's confession. He paused at the description of the suburban house, the place Andrew had moved to after leaving Royal Lodge. The room felt heavy as lead. Charles remained silent for a long time, gazing out the window at the fog-covered palace garden. He thought of the years when Andrew had been a source of pride, then the endless scandals, and now this betrayal. "I had hoped it was all a misunderstanding," he whispered. "But now it cannot be." Charles turned back, eyes red. "Convene an internal meeting today." The emergency meeting was held that afternoon in Buckingham Palace's large conference room. Tension filled the air. Key royal family members and several long-standing advisers sat around the long table. Andrew was summoned last. He entered in a dark suit, face pale, trying to appear calm, but everyone noticed the tremor in his step. When the door closed, Charles spoke. "Andrew, we are here because of what happened with Royal Lodge. William will present the findings." William stood, voice steady. "Andrew colluded with Edward Hargrove to divert Royal Lodge maintenance funds. The money was not spent on the residence, but used to construct a private house in Surrey." He placed the dossier on the table and opened it to the key pages. Andrew stared at the documents, lips moving, but no words coming out. Andrew tried to defend himself. "This is a misunderstanding. Hargrove may be blaming me to save himself. I knew nothing about the money transfers." But his voice was weak and unconvincing. William responded immediately. "We have receipts showing a £500,000 transfer to Hargrove. We have images of you meeting him at that house. You were planning to sell it, to erase the trail, weren't you?" Andrew bowed his head and fell silent. The climax came when Charles spoke, voice heavy but authoritative. "Andrew, you have betrayed the trust of the family, of the royal family, of the people. You misused taxpayers' money to build a private residence for yourself. This is not a personal mistake. This is unforgivable conduct." The room felt frozen. The conclusion was reached in a heavy but necessary atmosphere. Andrew was required to repay the full amount misused, estimated at over £12 million, including interest and investigation costs. He must sell the Surrey house immediately and transfer all proceeds to the royal fund. All ownership rights and benefits related to the property were terminated. Andrew would no longer be permitted access to any royal assets without strict supervision. Finally, Charles looked directly into his brother's eyes. "This is for the royal family, for what we represent. You must take responsibility." Andrew left the meeting room without another word. He walked down the long corridor, a lonely figure beneath the dim golden lights. When the meeting ended, the sun had set. Buckingham Palace sank into darkness, but a layer of fog had lifted. The truth before the throne was not anyone's victory. It was a harsh lesson about trust, duty, and the consequences of greed. The British royal family, though shaken, remained standing thanks to people like William, who dared to confront the darkness within their own family. When Prince Andrew sought to conceal and protect his personal interests, do you feel he was a man weakened by circumstance or a man who willingly crossed the moral boundaries that his royal role demanded? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy.